Have you ever wondered why some people grow old gracefully, radiating wisdom and contentment, while others seem to carry the weight of bitterness and regret? What if I told you that the secret to a fulfilling old age isn't about luck, wealth, or even perfect health, but about mastering 6 fundamental principles that can transform your golden years into the most meaningful chapter of your life? Today, we're diving deep into the profound wisdom of Jorge Bucay, the renowned psychotherapist and author who has spent decades helping people unlock their potential and find peace in every stage of life. Welcome back to The Heart Code, where we explore the deepest truths about human psychology, relationships, and personal transformation. I'm so grateful you're here today because we're about to embark on a journey that could fundamentally change how you think about aging, purpose, and happiness. Before we dive in, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you find value in this video, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover this content. Drop a comment below sharing which principle resonates most with you. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. And if you haven't already, subscribe to The Heart Code and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into psychology and personal growth. For those who want to support the channel and help us create more transformative content like this, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support means the world and allows us to continue bringing you these life-changing insights. Now, let's talk about Jorge Bucay and why his perspective on aging matters so much. Jorge Bucay is an Argentinian psychotherapist, Gestalt therapist, and writer whose books have touched millions of lives around the world. His approach combines deep psychological insight with storytelling, philosophy, and practical wisdom. Unlike many self-help gurus who offer quick fixes, Bucay invites us to explore the depths of our inner world, to question our assumptions, and to embrace the full spectrum of human experience. Today, we're focusing on his teachings about growing old with grace, strength, and happiness. These aren't superficial tips about staying young or denying the reality of aging. Instead, they're profound principles about how to live fully at every stage of life, and especially how to make your later years the most fulfilling time of all. For Principle 1, accept the reality of change and impermanence. Let's begin with what might be the most challenging yet liberating principle of all: accepting the reality of change and impermanence. This isn't just about accepting that you're getting older. It's about fundamentally understanding that everything in life is constantly changing, and that resistance to this truth is the root of most of our suffering. Jorge Bucay often speaks about how we spend the first half of our lives building an identity, accumulating experiences, relationships, and possessions, and creating a sense of who we are. We construct elaborate stories about ourselves. I am a professional. I am a parent. I am attractive. I am strong. I am independent. These identities give us a sense of security and purpose. Yeah, but then aging comes along and challenges every single one of these constructs. Your body begins to change in ways you can't control. Your career might end through retirement. Your children grow up and leave. Friends and loved ones pass away. The roles that once defined you start to shift or disappear entirely. For many people, this feels like a devastating loss. They fight against it, spending enormous energy trying to hold on to what was, trying to stay the same, trying to deny the passage of time. But Bucay teaches us that this resistance is futile and exhausting. More than that, it prevents us from experiencing the beauty and freedom that comes with acceptance. When we accept that change is the fundamental nature of existence, we stop wasting energy on an impossible battle. We stop comparing our current self to our younger self. We stop grieving for what we've lost and start appreciating what we have right now. This acceptance doesn't mean resignation or giving up. It means recognizing reality clearly so we can work with it rather than against it. Think about it this way. A tree doesn't resist the changing seasons. It doesn't cling to its summer leaves or fight against the approach of winter. It moves through each season fully, expressing the unique beauty of each phase. In spring, it blooms. In summer, it provides shade. In autumn, it releases its leaves in a spectacular display. In winter, it rests and gathers strength for the next cycle. We can learn from this natural wisdom. Each stage of life has its own gifts, its own forms of beauty, its own opportunities for growth and contribution. But we can only receive these gifts if we stop clinging to what belongs to a different season. In practical terms, what does this acceptance look like? It means acknowledging when your body can't do what it used to do without shame or self-judgment. It means recognizing that your energy levels have changed and adjusting your expectations accordingly. It means letting go of career ambitions that no longer serve you. It means accepting that your role in your children's lives has evolved from caretaker to advisor, from authority figure to friend. But here's the beautiful paradox that Bucay points out. When we stop resisting change, we actually become more present and alive. Instead of living in the past, constantly comparing now to then, we become fully engaged with our current experience. We notice things we were too busy to see before. We appreciate moments we would have rushed past. We find new interests, new relationships, new sources of meaning that we couldn't have accessed if we were still clinging to our old identity. Accepting impermanence also changes our relationship with loss and death. When we truly understand that everything is temporary, we stop taking things for granted. We treasure the moments we have with loved ones. We express our love more freely. We say what needs to be said. We don't postpone joy, waiting for some perfect future that may never come. Bucay often tells the story of people who receive a terminal diagnosis and suddenly see their whole life differently. Suddenly, petty concerns fall away. Suddenly, they appreciate simple pleasures, the taste of food, the warmth of sunshine, a conversation with a friend. They wonder why they waited so long to live this way. They realize they could have been this present, this grateful, this alive all along. You don't need to wait for a crisis to wake up to impermanence. You can choose to embrace this truth right now. And when you do, something miraculous happens. Instead of making you fearful or depressed, accepting impermanence actually makes you more grateful, more loving, more engaged with life. This principle also applies to our mental and emotional patterns. As we age, we have an opportunity to let go of old grudges, outdated beliefs, and habitual ways of thinking that no longer serve us. We can release the need to be right all the time. We can stop nursing ancient wounds. We can forgive ourselves and others. We can update our worldview based on the wisdom we've accumulated. Many people carry the same emotional baggage through their entire lives, defending the same positions, repeating the same arguments, holding on to the same resentments. Bucay asks us, why? What are you protecting? What are you afraid will happen if you let go? The truth is that holding on is exhausting. It takes tremendous energy to maintain rigid positions, to keep walls up, to defend against change. When you finally release that grip, you discover an incredible lightness. You have more energy for what truly matters. You become more flexible, more adaptable, more resilient. Think about the people you know who have aged well. Chances are they're people who have embraced change rather than resisted it. They're curious about new experiences. They're willing to learn. They adapt to new circumstances without constant complaint. They don't spend their time talking about how much better things used to be. They engage with life as it is now, finding beauty and meaning in each moment. This doesn't mean they don't have preferences or that they don't sometimes miss the past. It means they don't get stuck there. They can feel nostalgia without being imprisoned by it. They can acknowledge loss without being defined by it. They move forward, always forward, even when the path leads into unknown territory. Bucay reminds us that aging itself is a privilege denied to many. Every birthday, every gray hair, every wrinkle is evidence that you've been given another day, another year, another chance to love, to learn, to grow, to contribute. When you see it this way, how can you resent the passage of time? How can you wish you were younger when being older means you've been blessed with more life? Accepting change and impermanence is the foundation of all the other principles we'll discuss. It's the ground from which everything else grows. Without this acceptance, you'll constantly be fighting reality, which is a battle you can never win. With this acceptance, you're free to dance with life, to flow with its rhythms, to find joy in each new phase of the journey. Principle 2. Cultivate meaningful relationships and deep connections. The second principle, Jorge Bucay emphasizes for a happy and strong old age, is cultivating meaningful relationships and deep connections. This might sound obvious, but Bucay's insight goes far beyond the simple advice to stay social. He's talking about the quality of our connections, not just the quantity. Research consistently shows that one of the strongest predictors of happiness and longevity is the quality of our relationships. Not how many friends we have, not how popular we are, but how deeply connected we feel to the people in our lives. The famous Harvard study of adult development, which followed people for over 80 years, found that good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. It's not about being in a relationship or having lots of friends. It's about the depth and authenticity of those connections. As we age, something interesting often happens to our social circles. They tend to get smaller. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, research on what psychologists call the socio-emotional selectivity theory shows that as people get older, they naturally become more selective about where they invest their social energy. They start to prioritize meaningful relationships over casual acquaintances. They'd rather have a deep conversation with one close friend than small talk with a dozen people at a party. Bucay encourages us to lean into this natural tendency, but to do it consciously and intentionally. Ask yourself, who in my life truly matters? Who energizes me? Who accepts me as I am? Who can I be completely honest with? Who shares my values? Who brings out the best in me? These are the relationships worth investing in. But here's where it gets challenging. Maintaining deep relationships requires vulnerability, honesty, and ongoing effort. It's easy to let relationships drift into comfortable patterns where you no longer really talk about what matters. You stick to safe topics, you avoid conflict. You present a polished version of yourself rather than revealing your true thoughts and feelings. Bucay teaches that as we age, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to deepen our existing relationships and to approach new relationships with greater authenticity. What do you have to lose at this point? Why are you still hiding? Why are you still pretending? The freedom that comes with aging is the freedom to be yourself, fully and unapologetically. This means being willing to have difficult conversations. It means expressing your needs and boundaries clearly. It means telling people you love them. It means apologizing when you've hurt someone. It means asking for help when you need it. It means sharing your fears, your dreams, your regrets, your hopes. Now, many people find that their most meaningful relationships in later life are those where they can be completely real, where they don't have to maintain a facade, where they can talk about their mortality, their fears, their deepest questions without judgment. These relationships become sacred spaces where authentic human connection happens. Bucay also emphasizes the importance of intergenerational connections. There's something profoundly meaningful about relationships that cross age boundaries. Young people bring fresh perspectives, energy, and hope. Older people offer wisdom, context, and the long view. When these connections are genuine, both parties benefit enormously. As an older person, you have so much to offer younger generations, but only if you're willing to meet them where they are. This doesn't mean abandoning your values or pretending to understand everything about their world. It means being curious, listening deeply, and sharing your experience without preaching. It means being a safe person to talk to, someone who offers perspective without judgment. Many older people complain that young people don't respect them or value their wisdom. But Bucay would ask, have you made yourself someone worth listening to? Do you approach younger people with genuine interest in their lives? Or do you just want to lecture them? Do you share your stories as gifts, or do you impose them as obligations? The most beloved older people are those who maintain a sense of curiosity and openness. They ask questions. They admit what they don't know. They're willing to learn. They share their wisdom when asked, not as pronouncements, but as offerings. They create space for others to discover their own truth, rather than insisting on one right way. Bucay also talks about the importance of dealing with relationship wounds and unfinished business. As we age, we often carry regrets about relationships that ended badly, words left unsaid, apologies never made, reconciliations that never happened. These unresolved issues can weigh heavily on us, becoming heavier with each passing year. Now is the time to address them. Reach out to people you've lost touch with. Make amends where possible. Say what needs to be said, not because you're guaranteed a particular outcome, but because you'll know you tried, because you took responsibility for your part, because you valued the relationship enough to make the effort. Sometimes reconciliation isn't possible or appropriate. The other person might not be receptive, or the relationship might have been genuinely harmful. In those cases, you can still find closure through forgiveness. Not forgiveness that excuses bad behavior, but forgiveness that releases you from carrying the burden of resentment. Bucay teaches that forgiveness is primarily a gift to yourself. When you forgive, you're not saying what happened was okay. You're saying you're no longer willing to let it consume your energy and attention. You're reclaiming your peace. You're choosing freedom over bondage to the past. Another crucial aspect of meaningful relationships in later life is learning to receive as well as give. Many people are much more comfortable being the helper, the supporter, the strong one. But aging often requires us to become comfortable with dependence, with needing help, with receiving care. This can be profoundly difficult, especially for people who have built their identity around being independent and capable. But Bucay points out that allowing others to care for us is actually a gift to them. It deepens the relationship. It allows them to express their love in concrete ways. It creates an opportunity for intimacy and connection that wouldn't exist otherwise. The key is to receive with grace and gratitude rather than shame or resentment. To acknowledge your needs honestly without making others feel obligated or burdened. To express appreciation. To remain as autonomous as possible in the areas where you still can be while accepting help where you need it. Bucay also emphasizes the importance of solitude in the context of relationships. The goal isn't to be constantly surrounded by people. It's to have meaningful connections that sustain you while also being comfortable in your own company. The people who age best are those who have developed a rich inner life, who can be alone without being lonely, who find meaning and purpose that doesn't depend entirely on external relationships. This balance between connection and solitude is crucial. You need relationships that nourish you, but you also need space for reflection, for processing, for simply being with yourself. The quality of your relationship with yourself profoundly affects the quality of all your other relationships. What does a good relationship with yourself look like? No, it means treating yourself with the same kindness and compassion you'd offer a good friend. It means accepting your flaws and limitations without harsh self-judgment. It means appreciating your strengths and celebrating your growth. It means listening to your own needs and honoring them. As you cultivate this relationship with yourself, you become a better friend, partner, parent, and community member. You're not looking to others to fill a void or validate your worth. You're coming from a place of wholeness, offering your authentic presence as a gift. Bucay reminds us that it's never too late to develop new friendships or deepen existing ones. Don't assume that the relationships you have now are all you'll ever have. Stay open. Be willing to put yourself in situations where new connections can form. Join groups, take classes, volunteer. You show up in your community, and when you meet new people, bring your full self. Don't hide your age or apologize for it. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Your authenticity will attract people who appreciate you for who you truly are. These are the relationships worth having. The loneliest old age is not the one spent alone, but the one spent surrounded by people with whom you can't be real. The richest old age is one filled with relationships, characterized by mutual respect, genuine affection, honest communication, and shared meaning. These relationships don't just make life more pleasant. They give life purpose. They remind you why you're here. They connect you to something larger than yourself. Principle 3. Maintain purpose and contribution. Jorge Bucay's third principle for a strong and happy old age is maintaining a sense of purpose and continuing to contribute to something beyond yourself. This principle addresses one of the most common and devastating experiences of aging, the loss of purpose that often comes with retirement, declining health, or changing roles. For most of our adult lives, our sense of purpose is tied to specific roles and achievements. We're parents raising children. We're professionals building careers. We're contributors to our communities. We're learners acquiring skills. We define ourselves by what we do, and this doing gives our life structure, meaning, and value. But then aging begins to strip away these roles. Children grow up and no longer need daily care. Careers end. Physical limitations make certain activities impossible. We're no longer needed in the same ways. And if we haven't developed a deeper sense of purpose beyond these external roles, we can feel lost, useless, invisible. Bucay teaches that one of the most important tasks of aging is to evolve from a purpose based on doing to a purpose based on being and contributing in new ways. This doesn't mean you stop doing things. It means you stop defining your worth solely by your productivity or your ability to perform specific tasks. Let's be clear about what purpose really is. Purpose isn't about grand achievements or changing the world. Purpose is about feeling that your existence matters, that you have something valuable to offer, that your life has meaning beyond just getting through each day. Yet purpose can be found in the smallest acts, listening to someone who needs to be heard, sharing wisdom with someone who's struggling, bringing beauty into the world through art or gardening, maintaining traditions that connect generations, standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. The key is to identify what gives you a sense of meaning and to organize your life around it. What do you care about? What breaks your heart? What brings you joy? What are you uniquely positioned to contribute? What problems in your community need addressing? What younger people need mentoring? What beauty needs creating or preserving? Bucay often points out that older people have incredible resources to offer. Wisdom earned through experience, perspective gained from seeing how things unfold over time, freedom from the pressure to impress others or climb career ladders, time to invest in what truly matters. The tragedy is when these resources go unused because people haven't identified ways to channel them. Let me give you some examples of how people maintain purpose and contribution in later life. Some become mentors, formally or informally, sharing their professional expertise with younger colleagues. Some volunteer for causes they care about, putting their time and skills toward making a difference. Some become storytellers, preserving family and cultural histories that would otherwise be lost. Some create art, write, make music, finally pursuing creative passions they didn't have time for earlier. Some become activists, using their freedom from career concerns to speak up for change. Some find purpose in being fully present for their grandchildren, not just as babysitters, but as teachers, playmates, and sources of unconditional love. Some cultivate beauty through gardening or other forms of creation. Some become the glue that holds communities together, the people who remember everyone's birthday, who check on neighbors, who organize gatherings. The specific form of contribution matters less than the intention behind it. What matters is that you feel you're giving something of value, that you're part of something larger than yourself, that your presence makes a difference. But here's what's crucial. Purpose in later life often requires letting go of old metrics of success and embracing new ones. If you measure your worth by your salary, your title, or your physical capabilities, aging will be devastating. But if you measure your worth by the quality of your presence, the wisdom you share, the love you give, the beauty you create, the stand you take for your values, then aging can actually enhance your sense of purpose. Bucay emphasizes that this shift requires conscious effort. It doesn't happen automatically. You have to actively reimagine what contribution means. You have to challenge internalized beliefs about productivity and worth. You have to resist the cultural message that older people are less valuable, less relevant, less important. This is where the work of accepting change comes back into play. You can't cling to your old identity as a high-powered professional or a hands-on parent, and also embrace new forms of purpose. You have to let go of who you were to become who you can be now. One powerful way to maintain purpose is to view yourself as a keeper of wisdom and a bridge between generations. You've lived through historical events that younger people only read about. You've navigated challenges, made mistakes, learned lessons. You've seen how choices play out over decades. You understand that most crises pass, that most fears don't materialize, that resilience is possible even after devastating losses. This perspective is incredibly valuable, but only if you share it thoughtfully, not as lectures about how much harder things were in your day, not as criticism of how young people do things now, but as stories, as reflection, as companionship for others on their own journeys. Bucay talks about the concept of generativity, a term coined by psychologist Erik Erikson to describe the concern for guiding the next generation. Generativity is about leaving something behind, about contributing to the continuity of life beyond your own existence. It's one of the key developmental tasks of later adulthood. People express generativity in countless ways: teaching, mentoring, creating works that will outlast them, preserving environments or traditions, investing in young people's success, fighting for a better future even though they might not live to see it. Generativity gives life meaning because it connects us to something that will continue after we're gone. But generativity requires humility. It means accepting that the world will continue without you, and that's okay. It means planting trees whose shade you'll never sit in, fighting battles you might not win, starting projects you might not finish. It means working for something bigger than your own benefit. Maintaining purpose also means staying engaged with the world. It's easy as you age to retreat into a smaller and smaller circle, to stop paying attention to what's happening beyond your immediate concerns. But Bucay encourages continued engagement with ideas, with current events, with the larger questions humanity is grappling with. This doesn't mean you have to stay stressed about the news or overwhelmed by problems you can't solve. It means remaining curious, maintaining perspective, continuing to learn and grow. Read books that challenge your thinking. Follow developments in fields you care about. Have conversations about ideas, not just small talk. Take positions on issues that matter to you. The purpose also comes from taking responsibility for your own well-being and growth. You're not a passive recipient of whatever aging brings. You're an active participant in shaping your experience. This means taking care of your health to the extent you can. It means continuing to challenge yourself intellectually. It means pursuing interests and developing new skills. It means maintaining your independence as much as possible. Even when physical or cognitive limitations make certain activities impossible, you can find purpose in how you handle those limitations. Do you face them with courage and grace? Do you find creative adaptations? Do you maintain your spirit even when your body fails? Do you treat caregivers with kindness and appreciation? Do you find moments of beauty and connection even in difficult circumstances? Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, taught that we can't always choose our circumstances, but we can always choose our attitude toward them. We can find meaning even in suffering, purpose even in limitation. This is perhaps the ultimate test of a life lived with intention. Can you maintain your sense of meaning and purpose even when everything is stripped away? Bucay would add that this requires ongoing reflection. You need to regularly ask yourself, what matters to me right now? How can I contribute? What gives my life meaning? The answers will change as you age and your circumstances evolve. What gave you purpose at 60 might not work at 80. What was meaningful when you were healthy might need to be reimagined when you're dealing with illness. This ongoing process of finding and refining purpose is itself a form of purpose. It keeps you engaged with life. It prevents you from becoming passive or resigned. It maintains your sense of agency and autonomy. One of the most beautiful things about finding purpose in later life is that it often involves coming full circle. You return to interests you had in youth but set aside for practical concerns. You reconnect with parts of yourself that got lost in the busy middle years. You finally have time to pursue what you're truly passionate about rather than what you're obligated to do. Many people find that their later years are the most creatively fulfilling precisely because they're no longer trying to prove anything or meet anyone else's expectations. They create for the joy of creating. They contribute because it feels meaningful, not because they're seeking recognition. They're finally free to follow their genuine interests and values. Purpose in old age is also about legacy, but not legacy in the traditional sense of leaving money or monuments. It's about the impact of your presence, the influence of your example, the ripples of your choices. How did you love? How did you handle adversity? What values did you embody? What kindness did you show? These are the things that truly endure. Bucay reminds us that a life of purpose isn't necessarily a life of comfort or ease. Purpose often requires effort, risk, vulnerability. It means caring about things, which means you can be hurt or disappointed. It means standing for something, which means dealing with opposition. But a purposeless life, no matter how comfortable, is ultimately empty. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges in old age. You will. The question is whether you'll face them as someone with a reason to get up in the morning, with something to contribute, with a sense that your life matters. That sense of purpose won't eliminate suffering, but it will give you the strength to endure it and the perspective to find meaning even in difficulty. Principle 4. Practice acceptance and self-compassion. The fourth principle, Jorge Bucay teaches for thriving in old age, is practicing acceptance and self-compassion. This builds on the first principle of accepting change, but goes deeper into how we treat ourselves in the face of aging's inevitable challenges and losses. Let's be honest, aging can be brutal. Your body betrays you in countless ways. You can't do things you once took for granted. You forget names. lose keys, struggle with technology that younger people navigate effortlessly. You see younger people doing with ease what now exhausts you. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. You deal with pain, illness, loss, mortality. The common response to all this is self-judgment. We berate ourselves for our limitations. We feel ashamed of needing help. We compare ourselves unfavorably to who we used to be. We internalize cultural messages that treat aging as failure, as something to fight against, hide, or apologize for. We become harsh, critical voices in our own heads, constantly pointing out everything that's wrong. Bucay teaches that this self-judgment is not only unnecessary, but actively harmful. It compounds the suffering of aging with an extra layer of psychological pain. It drains energy that could be used for adaptation and growth. It prevents us from accepting help, asking for what we need, and finding creative solutions to our challenges. The alternative is self-compassion, which means treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and patience you would offer a good friend going through difficulty. It means acknowledging that aging is hard without making yourself wrong for finding it hard. It means recognizing that you're doing your best with the resources you have. It means accepting your limitations without letting them define your worth. Dr. Kristen Neff, a leading researcher on self-compassion, identifies 3 components: self-kindness versus self-judgment, common humanity versus isolation, and mindfulness versus over-identification. Let's explore how each of these applies to aging. Self-kindness means being warm and understanding toward yourself when you fail, make mistakes, or encounter limitations, rather than ignoring your pain or beating yourself up with self-criticism. In the context of aging, this might mean speaking gently to yourself when you forget something, rather than calling yourself stupid. It might mean acknowledging that it's okay to rest when you're tired, rather than pushing yourself until you collapse. It might mean accepting that you can't do everything you used to do, and that doesn't make you worthless. Think about how you would talk to a friend who was struggling with the challenges of aging. You wouldn't say, "You should be ashamed of yourself for needing a cane. You're pathetic for not being able to do what you did 20 years ago." You'd say, "Of course this is difficult. It's hard to adjust to new limitations. You're handling this with courage. I'm here to support you." Why don't we offer ourselves that same compassion? Often it's because we've internalized harsh voices from our past, or because we believe self-criticism will motivate us to do better, or because we're afraid that self-compassion means giving up or making excuses. But research shows that self-compassion actually enhances motivation and resilience. When we treat ourselves kindly, we're more willing to acknowledge problems and work on them, because we're not terrified of being judged as deficient. We're more likely to try new things because failure doesn't mean we're worthless. We're more able to bounce back from setbacks because we maintain our sense of fundamental okayness, even when things go wrong. The second component is common humanity, which means recognizing that suffering and personal inadequacy are part of the shared human experience, rather than feeling isolated and alone in your struggles. So many older people feel that their experience of aging is somehow uniquely difficult or shameful. They see other people seeming to handle it better and assume they're the only ones struggling. But Bucay reminds us that everyone who lives long enough experiences the challenges of aging. Everyone's body breaks down. Everyone loses people they love. Everyone grapples with mortality. Everyone feels the disorientation of a world that keeps changing. You are not alone in this. You are not uniquely broken or deficient. This perspective is profoundly comforting. It means your struggles don't separate you from humanity. They connect you to it. It means you can reach out for support without shame because others understand. It means you can be honest about your experience without fear that you'll be judged as weak or insufficient. Common humanity also means recognizing that the difficulties of aging are not your fault. You didn't do something wrong that made you age. You're not being punished. You're simply experiencing what happens to all living beings. We're born, we grow, we age, we die. This is the nature of life. Fighting against it or feeling ashamed of it is like being angry at gravity for pulling things down. The third component is mindfulness, which means being aware of your present experience in a balanced way, neither ignoring your pain nor getting completely overwhelmed by it. This is the middle path between suppression and rumination. In terms of aging, mindfulness means acknowledging when you're in pain, when you're frustrated, when you're sad about losses without either pretending everything is fine or spiraling into despair. It means observing your thoughts and feelings with curiosity rather than getting caught up in them. It means recognizing that thoughts like, "I'm useless now," are just thoughts, not facts. Mindfulness practice is particularly valuable for older adults because it trains you to be present with whatever is arising, including difficult physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts. Instead of constantly dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, you can rest in this moment, which is the only moment you actually have. Bucay emphasizes that accepting yourself doesn't mean you stop trying to grow or improve. It means you work from a foundation of basic self-worth rather than trying to earn worth through achievement or perfection. It means you make changes because you care about yourself, not because you hate yourself. For example, you might exercise not because you're disgusted with your aging body, but because you love your body and want to take care of it as well as you can. You might work on cognitive challenges not because you're ashamed of forgetting things, but because you value your mental health and want to support it. You might seek medical care not from fear and self-judgment, but from compassion for your suffering and desire for relief. This shift in motivation makes a huge difference. When you're motivated by self-hatred or shame, you're unlikely to sustain positive changes. The internal critic is never satisfied. Nothing you do is ever good enough. But when you're motivated by self-compassion, the changes you make come from love, and they're sustainable because they feel like self-care rather than self-punishment. Self-compassion also means setting boundaries and advocating for yourself. Sometimes people confuse self-compassion with being passive or letting others walk all over you. But true self-compassion includes protecting yourself from harm, speaking up for your needs, and insisting on respectful treatment. As you age, you might need to have difficult conversations with family members about your care preferences. You might need to end relationships that are consistently hurtful. You might need to challenge ageist assumptions people make about you. You might need to refuse treatment options that don't align with your values. Say all of this is self-compassion in action. Bucay also talks about forgiving yourself for past mistakes and regrets. Many older people carry heavy burdens of guilt and regret about things they did or didn't do earlier in life. They beat themselves up for choices they made, opportunities they missed, people they hurt, time they wasted. Self-compassion means acknowledging that you did the best you could with the understanding and resources you had at the time. It means recognizing that everyone makes mistakes, has regrets, wishes they could change things about their past. It means accepting that you can't change what happened, but you can change how you relate to it now. This doesn't mean excusing genuinely harmful behavior or pretending you didn't make mistakes. It means taking responsibility without drowning in shame. It means making amends where possible and learning from the past without being imprisoned by it. One powerful practice Bucay recommends is writing a letter to yourself from the perspective of a wise, compassionate friend. What would this friend say to you about your struggles, your fears, your perceived failures? How would they acknowledge your pain while also reminding you of your strength? What perspective would they offer on your life as a whole? This exercise helps you access the compassionate voice you already have, but often silence in favor of the critical voice. It reminds you that you do know how to be kind. You just need to turn that kindness toward yourself. Another practice is to notice your self-talk throughout the day. What's the tone of voice in your head? Are you constantly criticizing yourself, predicting disaster, or ruminating on past failures? When you notice harsh self-talk, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, would I talk to someone I care about this way? If not, can I find a kinder way to phrase it? This isn't about positive thinking or denying reality. It's about shifting from hostile to friendly, from harsh to understanding, from judgment to acceptance. You can acknowledge the same reality with kindness instead of cruelty. Bucay reminds us that self-compassion becomes especially important when dealing with the losses of aging. You will lose people you love. You will lose abilities. You will lose aspects of your identity. These losses are real and painful. Self-compassion means allowing yourself to grieve, to feel the pain, to acknowledge what's been lost without rushing to fix it or suppress it. At the same time, self-compassion means not getting stuck in grief to the point where you can't move forward. It means supporting yourself through the painful process of letting go and opening to what's possible now. It means being patient with yourself as you adjust to new realities. The beautiful thing about developing self-compassion in old age is that it often frees you to be more compassionate toward others. When you're not constantly judging and criticizing yourself, you have more capacity to meet others with kindness and understanding. When you've accepted your own imperfections, you're more tolerant of others' flaws. When you've forgiven yourself, you find it easier to forgive others. This creates a positive cycle. Self-compassion leads to greater connection with others, which reinforces your sense of common humanity, which deepens your self-compassion. You become a source of warmth and acceptance in your relationships, which is one of the greatest gifts you can offer. Bucay teaches that self-compassion is not self-indulgence or weakness, it's strength. It takes courage to face your limitations honestly without hiding behind denial or shame. It takes wisdom to recognize that being human means being imperfect. It takes maturity to treat yourself with the same kindness you try to show others. As you age, you have an opportunity to finally make peace with yourself, to lay down the burden of constant self-judgment, to accept yourself fully just as you are. This acceptance doesn't mean you stop growing. Paradoxically, it's often the foundation for real growth. When you're not constantly defending against shame, you have energy for genuine transformation. When you accept where you are, you can move forward from there. The practice of self-compassion is a lifelong journey, not a destination. There will be days when you're kind to yourself, and days when the critical voice dominates. That's okay. Notice it. Come back to kindness again and again. This is the practice. Principle 5. Stay curious and keep learning. Jorge Bucay's fifth principle for a vibrant old age is maintaining curiosity and continuing to learn throughout your life. This principle directly challenges one of the most damaging stereotypes about aging: the idea that older people are set in their ways, closed to new ideas, unable or unwilling to learn new things. The truth, supported by neuroscience research, is that our brains remain capable of learning and creating new neural connections throughout our entire lives. This capacity for change, called neuroplasticity, means that mental decline is not inevitable. While certain cognitive functions may slow with age, others can actually improve, especially crystallized intelligence, which includes vocabulary, wisdom, and the ability to recognize patterns based on experience. But here's the key: you have to use it or lose it. The brain needs stimulation to stay healthy, just like the body needs exercise. When you stop learning, stop challenging yourself, stop engaging with new ideas, your cognitive function does decline. But when you actively pursue learning, you maintain and even enhance your mental capabilities. Bucay emphasizes that curiosity is one of the most vital qualities for successful aging. Curious people stay engaged with life. They ask questions, they explore, or they're interested in understanding how things work, why people behave as they do, what's happening in the world. This ongoing engagement keeps them mentally sharp and emotionally vibrant. Think about the older people you know who seem most alive, most interesting, most present. Chances are they're people who are curious about everything. They ask you questions about your work, your hobbies, your thoughts on current events. They share fascinating things they've read or learned. They have varied interests. They're open to new experiences. They don't assume they have all the answers. Contrast that with people who have stopped being curious. They repeat the same stories. They're not interested in anything outside their immediate concerns. They dismiss new ideas without consideration. They've concluded that they already know everything worth knowing. They're waiting for life to end rather than actively living. The difference isn't intelligence or education, it's attitude. It's whether you approach life with an open, questioning mind or a closed, knowing one. Bucay teaches that learning in later life should be driven by genuine interest and passion, not by external pressure or goals. You're not learning to get a promotion or pass a test. You're learning because you want to, because it brings you joy, because it makes life more interesting. This freedom to learn what you're genuinely curious about, without worrying about practical applications or what others think, is one of the great gifts of aging. You can finally study philosophy if you want, or astronomy, or pottery, or ancient history, or anything else that fascinates you, purely for the pleasure of learning. Learning keeps your mind active, but it also does something more profound. It reinforces your sense of possibility. Every time you learn something new, you prove to yourself that you can still grow, still change, still master new skills. This counters the narrative of inevitable decline and keeps you future-oriented rather than stuck in the past. There are countless ways to pursue learning in later life. You can take classes at community colleges or adult education programs. You can watch educational videos online. You can read books on topics you know nothing about. You can learn a new language. You can take up a musical instrument. You can study art or theater. You can attend lectures and workshops. You can join discussion groups. You can travel to new places and immerse yourself in different cultures. Technology has made learning more accessible than ever before. You can access world-class courses from prestigious universities for free online. You can learn almost any skill through YouTube tutorials. You can connect with communities of learners around the world. You can explore virtual museums and libraries. The barrier isn't access to learning opportunities. It's often fear. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of not being as quick as you used to be. Fear of failure. Fear that it's too late to start something new. Bucay encourages us to challenge these fears. Who says you have to be perfect at something to enjoy it? Who says you can't be a beginner at 70 or 80 or 90? In fact, being a beginner again can be incredibly humbling and valuable. It reminds you what it's like to struggle with something new. It generates empathy for others who are learning. It breaks down the ego that thinks it should already know everything. It reconnects you with the joy of discovery that children experience naturally. Learning also creates opportunities for social connection. When you take a class or join a learning community, you meet people who share your interests. You have conversations about ideas. You learn from others' perspectives. You're part of something larger than yourself. Bucay particularly emphasizes the value of learning things that are completely different from your previous expertise. If you spent your career in business, maybe explore art. If you were a scientist, maybe study poetry. This cross-pollination of ideas and ways of thinking keeps your mind flexible and creative. Learning also helps you stay relevant and connected to the changing world. Technology, culture, language, and social norms are constantly evolving. If you make no effort to understand these changes, you become increasingly disconnected from the world around you, unable to communicate effectively with younger generations, confused by references and concepts that others take for granted. This doesn't mean you have to adopt every new trend or agree with every change, but you should at least understand what's happening and why, so you can make informed choices about how to engage with it. You can decide to use certain technologies and not others, but that's different from refusing to learn about any of them because it's all too complicated. One powerful form of learning in later life is learning about yourself. After decades of living, you have a rich inner world to explore. You can examine your patterns, your beliefs, your fears, your desires. You can ask yourself deep questions. What have I learned from my life experiences? What patterns keep repeating? What do I still need to heal? What wisdom have I gained? What do I want to pass on? This self-exploration can take many forms: journaling, therapy, meditation, memoir writing, conversation with trusted friends. The point is to not just live your life, but to reflect on it, to extract meaning from it, to understand yourself more deeply. Bucay also talks about learning to see with fresh eyes, to notice what's around you as if for the first time. We tend to move through life on autopilot, not really seeing the familiar landscapes, not truly tasting our food, not listening deeply to conversations. But when you approach the world with curiosity, everything becomes interesting again. You can practice this by deliberately paying attention. Really look at a tree you pass every day. Notice its shape, its color, how it changes with the seasons. Really taste your food instead of mindlessly consuming it. Really listen when someone speaks instead of planning what you'll say next. This quality of attention transforms ordinary moments into rich experiences. This brings us to the relationship between curiosity and wonder. Curious people tend to experience more wonder, more awe, more appreciation for the mystery and beauty of existence. They're amazed that anything exists at all. They're moved by the intricacy of a leaf, the vastness of the cosmos, the complexity of a human being. This sense of wonder is profoundly life-affirming. It reminds you that life is precious and miraculous, not mundane and meaningless. It generates gratitude. It counters cynicism and bitterness. It keeps you connected to something larger than your own small concerns. Bucay points out that children naturally possess curiosity and wonder. They ask endless questions. They explore fearlessly. They're fascinated by everything. Then, as we grow up, we often lose these qualities. We learn not to ask too many questions. We become jaded. We think we know how things work. We stop wondering. But in later life, we have an opportunity to reclaim childlike curiosity without childish naivete. We can combine the wisdom of experience with the openness of a beginner's mind. We can question our assumptions while building on what we've learned. We can be both knowledgeable and humble. You're both informed and curious. Staying curious also means being willing to change your mind. Many people become increasingly rigid in their beliefs as they age, more convinced than ever that they're right about everything. But Bucay asks, how can you learn if you already think you know? How can you grow if you're closed to new information? Being open to changing your mind doesn't mean you have no convictions. It means you hold your convictions humbly, recognizing that you might be wrong, that you don't have all the information, that reality is more complex than any single perspective can capture. It means you're willing to update your beliefs based on new evidence or better reasoning. This intellectual humility is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. It shows that you care more about truth than about being right. It demonstrates that you're still growing, still learning, still willing to be surprised. Learning in old age also means learning from your own life. You've accumulated decades of experience. What have those experiences taught you? What wisdom have you gained that you couldn't have acquired any other way? What do you understand now that you didn't understand at 20 or 40 or 60? Taking time to reflect on these questions and articulate what you've learned is valuable both for you and for others. It helps you make sense of your life, find the thread that connects disparate experiences, recognize patterns and themes. And when you share these insights with others, you contribute your unique wisdom to the world. Bucay reminds us that learning is not just about accumulating information, it's about transformation. A real learning changes you. It shifts your perspective. It opens new possibilities. It makes you more than you were before. This transformative aspect of learning is available at any age, but it requires openness, humility, and willingness to be changed by what you discover. The commitment to lifelong learning is ultimately a commitment to remaining fully alive until you die. It's a refusal to resign yourself to decline and diminishment. It's an affirmation that as long as you're breathing, you can still grow, still discover, still be surprised, still change, still become more fully yourself. Principle 6. Embrace spirituality and find transcendent meaning. The sixth and final principle, Jorge Bucay emphasizes for aging well, is developing spirituality and connecting with transcendent meaning. This doesn't necessarily mean adopting a particular religion, though it can. It means cultivating a relationship with something larger than yourself, whether you call it God, the universe, nature, consciousness, or simply the mystery of existence. Why is this principle so important for older adults? Because aging inevitably confronts us with the biggest questions. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What happens when we die? What really matters in the end? These questions become urgent in a way they often aren't when we're young and death feels distant. When you're young, you can avoid these existential questions by staying busy, by focusing on building your career, raising your family, accumulating experiences and possessions. But as you age, and many of these projects come to an end, you're left face to face with the fundamental questions about meaning and mortality. You can respond to these questions in different ways. You can try to avoid them, distracting yourself with entertainment and busyness. You can fall into despair, concluding that life has no meaning and everything is pointless. Or you can engage with them seriously, exploring various philosophical and spiritual traditions, developing your own understanding of what it all means. Bucay encourages the third path. He believes that developing a spiritual dimension to your life provides comfort, meaning, and resilience in the face of aging's challenges. It helps you find peace with mortality. It connects you to something enduring even as your own life is ending. It provides a framework for making sense of suffering and loss. But what exactly is spirituality? Bucay would say it's the recognition that there's more to existence than just the material world, more to yourself than just your ego, more to life than just survival and pleasure. It's the experience of connection with something larger, something sacred, something that gives life depth and significance. Spirituality can manifest in countless ways. For some people, it's a traditional religious practice: prayer, attending services, reading sacred texts, following religious teachings. For others, it's found in nature, in the awe of watching a sunset or standing beneath stars. For some, it's in art, music, or poetry that touches something deep within them. For others, it's in moments of profound connection with other people, in experiences of compassion and love that transcend ordinary interaction. The specific form matters less than the quality of the experience. A sense of touching something real and meaningful, beyond your everyday concerns, a feeling of being part of something vast and mysterious, moments when you transcend your usual self-centered perspective and experience connection with all of life. Research shows that people with a strong spiritual life tend to age better. They report higher levels of life satisfaction and well-being. They cope better with illness and loss. They're less afraid of death. They have more sense of purpose and meaning. They experience less depression and anxiety. Why? Partly because spiritual practices provide community and support, but also because spirituality offers a different framework for understanding your life and your place in the universe. Instead of seeing yourself as an isolated individual doomed to eventual extinction, you see yourself as part of an interconnected whole, as a temporary expression of eternal consciousness, as a beloved child of the divine, as a wave in the ocean of being. This shift in perspective is profoundly comforting. It means your individual existence, while precious, is not the whole story. You come from something and return to something. Your life has meaning within a larger context. Death is not annihilation, but transformation, a return to source, a completion of one chapter in an ongoing story. Bucay emphasizes that you don't have to believe in a specific theology to benefit from spiritual practice. What matters is cultivating experiences of connection, transcendence, and meaning. This can happen through meditation, which quiets the ego mind and opens awareness to deeper dimensions of existence. It can happen through contemplation of beauty or nature. It can happen through acts of selfless service. It can happen through creative expression. It can happen through study of wisdom traditions. The key is to make space for these experiences rather than filling every moment with activity and distraction. Modern life makes it easy to avoid the big questions, to stay superficial, to never go deep. But Bucay teaches that depth is what nourishes the soul, especially in later life, when you need sources of meaning beyond external achievement. One powerful spiritual practice for older adults is cultivating gratitude. Instead of focusing on what you've lost or what's wrong, you deliberately notice what you have, what's good, what you've been given. This isn't about denying problems or pretending everything is perfect. It's about balancing the negative with awareness of the positive, recognizing blessings alongside burdens. You can practice gratitude by keeping a journal where you list things you're grateful for each day. They don't have to be big things. A moment of connection, a beautiful sky, a good meal, relief from pain, a kind gesture. The more you practice noticing what you're grateful for, the more you see. Your attention shifts from scarcity to abundance, from complaint to appreciation. Gratitude is deeply connected to spirituality because it recognizes that life itself is a gift, not something you earned or deserved, but something you've been given. This sense of having received opens your heart. It generates humility. It creates a sense of relationship with the giver, whether you call that God or the universe or life itself. Another important spiritual practice is forgiveness, which we touched on earlier but deserves deeper exploration here. Carrying resentment, hatred, and unforgiveness poisons your soul. It keeps you bound to the past. It prevents peace. In later life, when time is precious, do you really want to waste it nursing grudges and plotting revenge? Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt or excusing harmful behavior. It means releasing the desire for revenge and the endless rehearsal of grievances. It means accepting that the past cannot be changed and choosing to be free of its hold on you. It means wishing the other person well, or at least wishing them nothing rather than wishing them harm. A true forgiveness is a spiritual practice because it requires letting go of the ego's insistence on being right, on getting even, on making others pay. It requires trusting that justice will unfold in ways beyond your control and understanding. It requires compassion for the humanity of those who hurt you, recognizing that hurt people hurt people. The deepest forgiveness is often self-forgiveness. Many people carry tremendous guilt and shame about things they did or didn't do. They can't forgive themselves. They believe they deserve to suffer. But Bucay asks, what good does this self-punishment serve? Does it help anyone? Does it undo what happened? Or does it just add more suffering to an already suffering world? Forgiving yourself doesn't mean you think what you did was okay. It means you accept that you're human, that you made mistakes, that you did the best you could with the understanding you had, and that you can let yourself off the hook now. It means extending to yourself the same compassion you would offer others. Spirituality also involves grappling with mortality. Death is not an abstraction when you're old. It's a reality you're moving toward. Friends and loved ones die. You deal with serious illness. You know your time is limited. How do you make peace with this? Different spiritual traditions offer different answers. Some emphasize the continuation of consciousness after death, whether through reincarnation, resurrection, or some other form. Some emphasize returning to source, dissolving individual identity back into universal consciousness. Some focus on leaving a legacy that outlives the physical body. Yes, some stress the preciousness of each moment precisely because it's fleeting. Bucay doesn't prescribe a particular belief about death. Instead, he encourages exploring these questions seriously, reading different perspectives, reflecting on your own experiences and intuitions, and coming to whatever understanding brings you peace. What he does emphasize is that denying death or refusing to think about it doesn't make it go away. It just keeps you from preparing for it psychologically and spiritually. People who've thought deeply about death, who've made peace with their mortality, often face their final days with more grace and less fear than those who've avoided the topic their whole lives. One spiritual practice that helps with mortality awareness is meditation on impermanence. You deliberately contemplate the fact that everything changes, nothing lasts, all things arise and pass away. Your body, your thoughts, your feelings, your relationships, your possessions, all temporary. At first, this might seem depressing, but with continued reflection, it becomes liberating. When you truly accept impermanence, you stop clinging so tightly. You appreciate what you have while you have it, knowing it won't last forever. You prioritize what really matters. You let go more easily. You're less afraid because you understand that change and loss are not aberrations, but the nature of reality. Another crucial aspect of spirituality in later life is finding meaning in suffering. Aging involves suffering, physical pain, loss, decline, fear. You can't avoid it, but you can choose how you relate to it. Now, Viktor Frankl taught that suffering is unavoidable, but we can choose what meaning to make of it. We can see it as pointless cruelty, or we can find purpose in it. Maybe your suffering develops compassion and empathy. Maybe it burns away what's inessential, revealing what truly matters. Maybe it teaches lessons you couldn't learn any other way. Maybe it connects you to the suffering of all beings, creating solidarity. Maybe it's an opportunity to practice courage, grace, and dignity. Maybe it deepens your spirituality as you turn to sources of comfort beyond the material world. None of this means suffering is good or that you should seek it out. It means that when suffering is inevitable, you can still maintain your agency by choosing how you respond to it and what meaning you make of it. Bucay also talks about cultivating wonder and awe, which are deeply spiritual experiences. When you're struck by the beauty of a sunset, the vastness of the ocean, the intricacy of a flower, the mystery of consciousness, you're having a spiritual experience. You're connecting with something that transcends ordinary understanding. Older adults have a particular capacity for awe because they've seen enough to recognize how extraordinary existence is. They've witnessed the mystery of birth, the transformation of children into adults, the cycles of nature, the resilience of the human spirit. They can appreciate these miracles because they're not taking them for granted anymore. You can cultivate awe by deliberately seeking out experiences that inspire it. Spending time in nature, listening to sublime music, reading poetry, contemplating the cosmos, witnessing acts of great love or courage. Let yourself be moved. Let yourself feel small in the face of vast beauty. Let yourself be amazed that anything exists at all. Many spiritual traditions also emphasize the practice of compassion and loving kindness. These practices involve deliberately cultivating goodwill toward yourself and others, wishing for happiness and freedom from suffering for all beings. This counters the tendency toward bitterness, judgment, and hardness of heart that can develop if we're not careful. You can practice loving kindness through formal meditation, mentally offering phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease." Then extend the same wishes to others, loved ones, neutral people, difficult people, all beings everywhere. This practice softens your heart, generates compassion, and connects you to your fundamental interdependence with all life. Spirituality in old age also often involves a quest for wisdom. This is different from knowledge or information. Wisdom is deep understanding about what really matters, about how to live well, about the nature of reality and the human condition. It's integrative, bringing together all your experiences and learning into a coherent understanding. Many wisdom traditions teach similar core insights: the importance of love and compassion, the value of presence and mindfulness, the need for humility and acceptance, the reality of interconnection, the power of forgiveness, the preciousness of each moment. Exploring these teachings and testing them against your own experience is a profound spiritual practice. Bucay emphasizes that spirituality should make you more human, more loving, more present, more alive, not more rigid, judgmental, or detached from life. If your spiritual practice makes you kinder, more patient, more compassionate, more at peace, then it's serving you well. If it makes you harsh, superior, fearful, or disconnected, something has gone wrong. The ultimate goal of spiritual practice is not to achieve some transcendent state or escape from life, but to be fully present to life as it is, to meet each moment with an open heart, to love deeply, to appreciate the gift of existence, to contribute what you can, and to face your eventual death with peace and dignity. As you cultivate spirituality in your later years, you might find that your whole relationship with aging shifts. Instead of seeing it as decline and loss, you see it as ripening and deepening. Instead of resisting the changes, you recognize them as part of a sacred journey. Instead of fearing death, you make peace with it as the natural completion of life. This doesn't mean you won't feel sadness, fear, or grief. It means these difficult emotions exist within a larger context of meaning and connection. You're not alone in your struggles. You're held by something larger. Your life matters. Your suffering has purpose. You're part of an eternal story that continues beyond your individual existence. And there you have it, the 6 transformative principles from Jorge Bucay that can help you live a happy and strong life in old age. Let's briefly review what we've explored together today. First, accept the reality of change and impermanence. Stop fighting against the natural flow of life and instead embrace each season with grace and presence. Second, cultivate meaningful relationships and deep connections. Invest in the quality of your connections and allow yourself to both give and receive love authentically. Third, maintain purpose and contribution. Find ways to matter, to give, to make a difference regardless of your age or circumstances. Fourth, practice acceptance and self-compassion. Treat yourself with the kindness you would offer a dear friend, recognizing that aging is hard and you're doing your best. Fifth, stay curious and keep learning. Keep your mind engaged, ask questions, explore new interests, and maintain that sense of wonder about life. And sixth, embrace spirituality and find transcendent meaning. Connect with something larger than yourself and make peace with the deepest questions about life and death. These principles aren't just abstract ideas. They're practical approaches to living that can transform your experience of aging from something to dread into something to embrace. They can turn your later years into a time of depth, wisdom, connection, and meaning. But knowing these principles is just the beginning. The real work is putting them into practice in your daily life. Start small. Choose one principle that resonates most strongly with you right now and begin working with it. Notice what changes. Be patient with yourself. This is a journey, not a destination. I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me today on The Heart Code. If this video has given you valuable insights or shifted your perspective on aging, please show your support by hitting that like button. Your likes help this content reach more people who need to hear these messages. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which of these 6 principles resonates most with you? What challenges are you facing in your own aging process or in supporting older loved ones? What wisdom have you gained from your life experience that you'd like to share? Your thoughts and experiences add so much richness to our community conversation. Please share this video with someone who might benefit from it. Maybe someone who's struggling with aging, someone who's supporting an older parent, someone who needs to be reminded that their later years can be filled with purpose and joy. Sharing this content is one of the most powerful ways you can support this channel and help spread these important messages. If you haven't already, subscribe to The Heart Code and turn on that notification bell so you never miss our deep explorations of psychology, relationships, and personal transformation. We release new content regularly, and I promise we always go deep, always respect your intelligence, and always aim to provide real value. And finally, if you really want to support this channel and help us continue creating this kind of transformative content, consider leaving a super thanks. Your financial support allows us to invest more time and resources into research, production, and creating the highest quality content possible. Every contribution, no matter how small, makes a real difference and is deeply appreciated. Remember, aging is not something to fear or fight. It's a natural part of the human journey, and it can be a time of profound growth, deepening wisdom, and beautiful ripening. You have the power to shape your experience of aging through the choices you make, the attitudes you cultivate, and the practices you commit to. Jorge Bucay has given us a roadmap. Now it's up to each of us to walk the path. May you age with grace, strength, wisdom, and joy. May you embrace each moment fully. May you love deeply and be deeply loved. May you find meaning and purpose regardless of your circumstances. And may you face whatever comes with courage, compassion, and an open heart. Thank you again for being part of the Heart Code community. Until next time, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and remember, the best is yet to come.